make sure that, yeah, it looks like we're going. Yep, we got timer, we got waveform. I have notes, surprisingly.
We might be in a good... Oh, look at that. I have a waveform too. Oh my God.
Holy shit.
We might have everything we need. I sort of have notes, but I believe the best thing we're going to decide is we're going to Finkel this.
Oh, how do we Finkel it for the people at home?
Good luck.
In as much as this is getting cut, so it doesn't matter.
That's fair. In that case, then, we won't do that. In that case, we'll just use Napoleon's two-pronged plan for this here show.
Oh, do tell.
Well, it's two prongs. The first one, we show up.
Okay.
The second one, we see what happens.
Was Napoleon the first person who ever fucked around and found out?
Well, I mean, there was that thing in Russia, so yes.
Ooh. Come here for the music, you come here for the history. It's a full day here on the Fairly KickAss podcast. Please don't get your history from us. For the love of God, we will lead you astray. We will, I don't know, it'll be like Bluto from Animal House. It will just not be a great time.
Germans?
Forget it. He's rolling. What we will do, besides me going 2 for 2 on movie references in these episodes.
I am surprised, man. You keep this up, you're going to have to drop this entire gimmick of you just not seeing any movies because you're quickly seeing a bunch of movies.
Oh, contraire. I did not see that movie. I know the bit. I know the quote. Did not see the film. So
see, I was ready. You could have completely no-sold me, and I'd believe you from here to the end.
You know that this is a podcast of transparency.
Well, all right. Then let's be clear about what we're here to do, shall we?
What are we here to do?
Well, it's a day in the month that it only has one digit. So it means we're close to the beginning, which means we should review the music from the last month.
Yes, we should. That was July. Yes.
Correct.
Got it in one. I've already won the podcast. We don't even have to do the rest of it.
Well, here's the thing. And I think we can confess this, even though it'll probably be after the fact when this finally airs. But we're all out of a very bad case of Olympic brain. So I can't tell you exactly what day or day of the week it is, but I could actually tell you closer to like the competition day. Like, what day is it? Oh, it was 4x4 final day.
Yeah, 4x100 mixed medley day.
Mixed team judo final day.
Oh, that was a banger. That was an absolute banger.
Was.
Women's soccer quarterfinals day. But yeah, we are looking at the month that was of July. Zack and Dan, still minus a J for now. I know y'all are getting sick of just the two of us, and you miss Jay just like we do. But do not fear, he will be back in the saddle in the very near future, and he will anchor this podcast again. He will be the last leg of the relay of this podcast.
He will bring some legitimacy back to the team. He will be that anchor who's doing his 5th or 6th podcast. We gotta figure this one out.
Yeah, there's a segue there. We just we don't have it yet.
See, he'd have one. He'd jump in and be like, "Oh, it's this." Yeah.
Oh, instantly.
Even the Russian judge would approve. And that's another podcast. Let's stick to the music.
And speaking of that music, Dan, for the top 40 from this month, what did you think just overall?
You know, it continues a summer of good hits.
Nice.
Like, there really wasn't anything, obviously, aside from one song that I would say that, one or two songs that I would say no to. But honestly, again, there's a lot more quality stuff hitting, I guess, or not as much of an album drops where everything from one album is charting and diluting an entire month's worth of singles. I don't know if that's the case. Now, granted, there was a lot of Eminem. It was a good handful of songs from the Death of Slim Shady, which we'll talk about, I assume, in a little bit here. So there's that. Yeah. But for the most part, good stuff. And I will foreshout a little bit. Good stuff from unexpected places.
You heard it here first, y'all.
I may have to fight some people after this one, though.
It's the first month. I mean, we talk about, like you said, the concept of having the album release that really has so many hits on it and so many charting hits. And as far as that Eminem album, as you mentioned, I'm just kind of going through the list. It looks like 10 of 24 tracks that hit the top 40 this month, which is a lower percentage than we've seen for at least a number of months, sometimes between two or three or four, maybe not four, but two or three releases, but still it's much more varied, which is awesome.
Yeah. I mean, you go back a month and most if not all of the Billie Eilish's album charted in June. And then you go back to May and all of Taylor Swift charted, et cetera, et cetera. That really wasn't the case this month around.
Yeah, I think we're better for it. Like, we just from where we sit, like, we like variety. And I'm the album guy, I listen to this album. I listen to most albums, but if I'm thinking of the top 40, I want the top 40. I don't want the top 25 and then an album, that's not as fun.
There's another factor here that we might be into play, and it might be worth discussing down the line too. So if I can come back and get the data here, but it also appears that we're having, as we're going through the summer, we're also having more things stay in the top 40 for a longer period,
which is a good change. I don't recall that being really the case, at least like in 2023 as much. But it's a good change. It's a great change. Depending. There's a qualifier there.
Yeah, there's always qualifier. That's why I want to say I want to get some more data before I can make this argument. Let's put it that way.
Sure. That's fair. Yeah, we'll figure out. Yeah, we'll do what you said.
We'll get the nerds in the back on it. It'll be fine.
Analogies are not happening today, apparently, so we're just gonna shut those down.
Telling you, but like this, like, to break the fourth wall a little bit, this podcast recording has been delayed at least once because I couldn't brain good enough to speak in sentences and decided maybe tonight's not the night.
Words are hard sometimes, I've been there. Everyone listening has certainly been there.
Yeah, we've all been there.
But this is going to be our expected effort. Let's say that much. We're definitely not going above and beyond today.
No, but we're not going we're not going under the floor. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. It'll be the expected, fairly kick-ass performance that you've come to know and love. That you've come to know.
Yeah. Why don't you get us started? Yeah, with you said you're the albums guy. So what albums were really sticking out to you this past month?
So I had a few that I wanted to go over, just the usual top three, and then a couple of honorable mentions. But we're going to start with number 3. And it's one that I don't think is going to be any surprise to you, Dan, any surprise to the listeners, and really any surprise to anyone who hasn't been living under a rock for the past year or so. Because if you've been around music, and not just folk, not just Americana, not just country, but music in general, then you have at least noticed and acknowledged the ascent of one Zack Bryan. He's absolutely speed run the gamut from solid country Americana act to the next Bruce Springsteen. Not an analogy that I initially made myself, but it's not at all an analogy or a comparison rather, that I disagree with, because I think if he's not there, he's well on his way. Another thing that I agree with is that his 5th studio album, The Great American Bar Scene, is just that. It's in the name. It is great. Folks might be surprised to know that this is his 5th studio album, that he's one of those that has been in the game for a minute and, finally kind of transcending genres, which is super, super exciting and super deserved for him. Yes, the album is called The Great American Bar Scene, but don't let the name fool you. This is a very deep, very introspective album. Starting with the spoken word poem Lucky Enough, meandering through emotive tracks like 28 and the big single that most of y'all have heard, which is Pink Skies. Throughout the album, the moment really never seems too big for Bryan, and his britches never seem too big either, if that makes sense. Like, he doesn't seem like he's ever big-timing. He doesn't seem like he's ever at the point of, like, I'm successful so I can phone this in. No, he's getting after it. Every strum of the guitar, every sung note, every track, is absolutely 100% on point. Also, do not sleep on the song Sandpaper, which brings that whole comparison with Bruce Springsteen full circle because it actually features one Bruce Springsteen. Apparently, Game recognized Game, and the boss recognizes what Zach Bryan is doing, and will continue to do, certainly for the foreseeable future. So super, super good album.
Absolutely. The first thing I noticed, and you touched a little bit on it, is that I really like Lucky Enough as an album opener because it kind of is also like the thesis of the record. So it's a nice like table setter. Like this is what this record's going to be about, and this is the mood you should be in listening to this. And then here's the thing, like it feels a lot like his self-titled part 2, and in no way is that bad.
Yeah.
Like the sound is very similar. So if you like the previous record, this sounds the same. It's only been 10 months since that dropped. So it's been less than a year. So you could see a lot of these songs probably being written at the same time and worked on separately, but that's fine because the songwriting, the songwriting is what he meant to say, is strong as ever. Told you it's going to be one of those shows. Yeah, you said everything else about that collab with Bruce Springsteen. At its base, this is another great record of American storytelling that we have come to not like know, love, and expect from Brian. And again, as I said, we wrapped up on this self-titled album a little bit over a year ago, and you can never go, okay, I don't want to hear this anymore. What are you going to evolve into next? I'm like, don't continue to make music this good.
Absolutely. Like artists who try new things, who experiment, like that isn't a bad thing at all. But I feel like for this specific artist in this specific frame of his career, like he is basically not quite mastered the craft, but about as close as you can get. And I say that not to be derisive and not to be like, oh, you still got some things to learn, but like an artist like this is going to push the envelope of what he did before. Like you said, we saw it from his self-titled album to now. Like it's better. And his self-titled album was amazing. And this is somehow better. So I feel like, yes, I don't know how he could get better, how he could go up from the Great American Bar Scene, but I know that he can.
I feel like we're comparing him very favorably to Bruce Springsteen, which is an accurate comparison. Some of the songs kind of felt like along the lines of of early Mellencamp.
Sure.
And again, also not an insult. The sentiment attached to early Mellencamp is the point of view that Brian seems to be writing a lot about. And Mellencamp may have gone and kind of dumbed it down isn't the right word, but least common denominator it may have been where we were going with that. But there's a good comparison, and he and Chris Stapleton right now are kind of on their games when it comes to songwriting in Nashville.
Man, and talk about two similar stories too. Dudes that clawed and scratched to get any eyeballs on them in the first place, and then once they had it, like there was no turning back.
And there was another aspect to this album that I don't know how I missed after listening to the first several, but him also relating experiences of veterans because he is one. I did not realize he was a Navy vet as well until doing more research into this record. So putting that in my brain, even this new to me, so that might just be a new aspect that my brain's putting on some of his work, but putting that another part of the spectrum that he's looking through just kind of opens up those possibilities more.
Yeah, I want to fact check this to make sure it's right. I think he was in the Navy for like 8 years, if memory serves. But no matter how long it was, obviously that is 2013 to 2021, so about 8 years. Definitely puts a different perspective in anyone, much less a music artist. And he's still only 28. He's still young, and he's lived so many experiences that he's able to articulate through song. And yeah, it's like, just imagine what we'll be talking about when he's 38, how many other amazing albums he will have put out by that point.
It's incredible. Like I said, one of the best storytellers working right now.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to go from someone who has, been in the game for a while to Someone else who has also been in the game for a while and maybe doesn't have quite the exposure yet of a Zach Bryan, but I'm hopeful that she will get there in due time. Came across her originally from a Tiny Desk concert. For anyone who hasn't heard, that's something that NPR puts on, puts an artist or a band inside a really tiny library space, and they just get after it. And usually the results are magical. This one was no difference. It was actually the Tiny Desk concert of the producer Kenny Beats. Yeah, pull it up on YouTube after the show, of course. Listen to the rest of this and watch the whole thing because it's fantastic. But the relevant part to this is at 4 minutes and 10 seconds, where you'll hear a striking voice that pierces through all of the really excellent instrumentation. That artist, that vocalist, second studio album dropped and was just as lovely as I would imagine that it would have been. That vocalist is one Remy Wolf. The album is Big Ideas. It is a fun, danceable offering. It gives a bit of Dua Lipa, honestly. You know, it's different in sound, but not so different in vibe, not so different in style, and not so different in the fact that those kind of danceable tracks hide some also very emotive songwriting under the covers as well. Despite all of that, Remy's vocals are still the star of the show here. They still have that same piercing ability as they did in the Tiny Desk concert. They're still an undeniable force on every single one of these tracks. And speaking of those tracks, Alone in Miami was the top track for me. If you want a little bit of a change of pace from the more dancey sort of songs, cue up just the start. It is more stripped down, more acoustic, not at all indicative of the rest of the album. It is a bit of an outlier. It's still every bit as good. But yeah, it's a fun, great album, and hopefully will be a springboard to bigger and better things for Remy in the future.
I really, really like the comparison you made there. And I think it's safe to make that claim that if Dua Lipa had decided to go the indie pop route instead of the disco and synth pop route, this is the type of record she'd be making. That's a really good comparison. And again, this one, another standout. I was with you until you told me like, hey, this is a record you should listen to because we're gonna talk about this record. And I was like, oh, okay. And it's very cool in all the best indie ways. Like there's definitely some tracks that are a little weird and a little out there, but in the most fun way. And I will add Cherries and Cream to some of the top tracks to get to. Because it's an indie pop record. Then all of a sudden, it's like Pink Floyd and the Who decided to step on the track a little bit and get all psychedelic in this room. That's probably my fave, along with Wave and then the title track as well.
It was unique in a lot of ways. Some of them were more straightforward, and like you said, some of them did go that experimental route that we were talking about when we were chatting about Zach Bryan. It works here.
It works sort of. I mean the one that you mean like Slay Bitch probably.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. It took one or two listens to give like okay, I see what you're doing there.
Let's see. Before, unless you had something else on that one, I didn't want to cut you off.
No, I think you hit it. You hit all the good high notes there.
That's sweet. Well, my number one album of July is a soundtrack. And anyone who's followed the show knows that I typically shy away from soundtracks for the monthly album reviews, and I think Jay does too. But this time it felt right to break that rule because the source material is just so fantastic, and also because the movie around this isn't out yet, weirdly enough, which we'll get into a little bit more in a minute. But regardless of all that, the album of its own accord, on its own merits, just absolutely slaps. It is the end of a glorious era because of the announcement from Donald Glover, noted everything person, because he's literally done it all, has announced that this would be the last album under the Childish Gambino moniker. Not sure exactly what that means for future Donald Glover music, if there is future Donald Glover music. But if Bando Stone and the New World is the swan song, then what a perfect swan song it could possibly be. It's a hip hop album. It's also an R&B album. It's also a little bit of an emo album. It also has a Prodigy sample track that sounds like it should be following Rockefeller Skank on the track list. It is a lot of things, and it is a lot of things that work perfectly with each other. There's a synergy here. There is a cohesiveness to the album. And even though it goes in a lot of directions, it all fits together. In the Night is one of the smoothest R&B tracks I've heard this year, and coincidentally, my favorite track on the album, featuring Georgia Smith and Amaray. Hopefully I pronounced both of those correctly. Also, shout out to We Are God, which sounds like, if there's any track on this album that sounds like it is a movie score or from a movie score, it's We Are God. And just kind of a reminder that, yeah, at some point there's going to be a film around this. And I, for one, can't wait. If this music is the backdrop, then I can't imagine it's going to be bad. Not to mention that everything that Donald has done has been fabulous because he just has the Midas touch. But yeah, Bando Stone in the New World as the end, as the beginning, whatever you want to call it, just call it a good album, because that's exactly what it is.
You know, and I'd actually read some criticism about this, and for full disclosure's sake, if I was doing what I did last time and contributing a top 3 albums, this would have been my album of the month too. But I've seen some criticism and complaint about this being a soundtrack album, and it's now everywhere, and it's kind of giving people auditory whiplash. And I'm like, yeah, but that's not an actual critique of what you're listening to, just how what you're listening to is structured. And also, if you remember that this album serves 2 purposes, that's not a problem. That's a you problem. That's not a record problem. I would add some cool things to it, like one of the best R&B ballads I've heard in quite a while, in Steps Beach, which was one of my favorites. And then just a random like Latin jazz swing kind of thing with No Excuses, which kind of quickly also shot up my list as well. And like you said, there's a lot here. So go listen to the record.
Yeah, and we'll obviously tell you where to get at us after we're done with this whole thing, but curious to hear what you think of all of those records. But for right now, listeners, we're going to all love to hear about those top 40 tracks that we had alluded to. And Dan, I will hand the reins off to you to go through what you thought about that.
Well, I was going to look at my honorable mention track and then realized my honorable mention is Eminem featuring Big Sean and Babytron and Toby. And so then, like, let's get this out of the way now. That's a Slim Shady. There's a lot going on there. Speaking of a character or an alter ego allegedly being retired, and the purpose of that character was one thing, and that character at age 51 really sounds like an old man yelling at clouds, or your drunk uncle yelling at the kids from the porch, and being as obscene as he possibly can about it. And that's why it works in some places and it doesn't work in a lot of others. But yeah, there is a good thing that I can raise up, and that would be Toby. And part of the reason is one of the unique things that Eminem is great at is taking a song with this really weird energy and making something of it. And that's this track. Toby only works because it's an Eminem track. If you give this beat to somebody else, it's just gonna fall flat. Nobody else can pull this off as well. Right from the beginning with Babytron's hook, which makes no sense, and from what I understand, annoys the hell out of comic book people. It's a track full of machine gun triplets and fire bars from both M and Big Sean, who kind of steals the show on this one a little bit.
Yeah, would not disagree at all. I mean, it definitely is a Southeast Michigan triumvirate of the three, with M and Sean from Detroit, and Babytron apparently from Ypsilanti, which is right there. Shout out Eagles. I'm pointing at my mitten right now. If you know, you know. Yeah, it's the sum of the parts. It's an Eminem track in name only. It's really a track with 3 really talented rappers putting down 3 great sections of song that works together. This is a cohesive track on a maybe not as cohesive album, but this track absolutely slaps. And I like it. Also, you have 3 unique sounds coming together to work well on one track, which helps a lot. For sure. I would totally agree that Big Sean was definitely the strongest of the 3, but that's not to take away from either of the other 2.
No, it's just not the name. Like of the two, you're like, oh well, if this is the case, then the new guy is going to be the one who kind of shows up and steals the show. And like, no, not the case at all. It's
Mm-mm.
the ass guy.
Oh God, don't remind me of that fucking song. I hate that song so much.
He is literally an ass man. Dun dun.
Oh my God. The rest of the show just going through my head. Now make that motherfucker hammer time. Like, no, I will not make that motherfucker hammer time. There's no chance of that happening, Sean. How dare you, Big Sean? I'm gonna have one of your albums on vinyl, damn it.
He's personally offended. That's what you did.
Well, you mentioned that was your honorable mention.
Yes.
What else at the top? I guess you're number 3 for the month.
Well, I mentioned at the start of the show surprises from least likely places, sort of like Big Sean taking the stage here. So let's go to move on to number 3. And country fans have long pined for the sounds of the mid to late 90s. It's a time period that gets put up on a pedestal quite a bit, as was the last huge period of crossover success. Well, I mean, before like the last year plus or so, I guess. But I still think even now, the 90s were bigger for country. And then the sound generally had a blend of that old school and new school, depending on. Granted, that didn't always make people happy. Looking at you, whoever wrote Murder on Music Row. Oof. Couldn't be bothered to look that up. But the sound of that heyday is on its way back. And of all the people who are actually bringing that back, it may just be Post Malone that's most helping it to return. At number 2 or 3, excuse me, because I can count. As I mentioned, the least likely of duos, Post Malone and Blake Shelton, and Pour Me a Drink. And I honestly cannot get over how well Posty's voice just slides perfectly into country. I mean, like, after his second album, I think after this second full-length album, we all kind of like, look, dude, you don't need to do the psycho rap thing, or the rap like the rap on Psycho, because it's like your Quaalude voice isn't working. You do have some pipes that work here. You should work into those. I want to say like circles is what we discovered that, and it transfers really well to country. I mean, the songwriting, it's not breaking any new ground here. Let's not lie. It's the she's gone, so I look like I need a drink. But at least it's well done. It fits in with that big boisterous sound that Shelton made his name on, standing on the shoulders of guys like Tim McGraw and Garth Brooks. Now, granted, I may completely be missing the mark with these comparisons, and someone who has far more depth into their country history can absolutely correct me later on, and Zach will tell you how to do that at the very end here. But look, this song is lively, the hook is solid, and more importantly, it is so much better than the Trong with Morgan Wallen, which, of course, I think it did better because of the name attached to it, because, But either way, Malone's strategy of working with names to help establish him in Nashville may just pay off in the long run, especially if it continues to produce songs like this that, check off all those genre boxes and throw in enough of that nostalgic sound and vibe, and also continue to not sound like Pip farting on a snare drum.
Ah, there it is. Haven't heard that reference in too long. If I knew what came next, I would.
That's usually where Jay
farting on a snare drum.
That's where Jay would come in with that line. That's exactly it.
Damn it, Jay, come back home.
Or maybe you should just watch Airheads. One of the two.
It's on the list. It's somewhere on the list.
Good. I'm just gonna go ahead and do my number 2, if that's
Please
okay.
Do.
Okay.
Get us out of here. You're number 2.
Yeah. And again, we do that whole thing on what's wrong with country, and then I'm going to move to a different area in the country scene, but stay in that nostalgic realm as well. And I don't need to talk a whole lot about this, because I think you already did a yeoman's job telling us what works so well on the Great American Bar scene. But allow me to wax a little poetic about more about my number 2 song off that record, American Nights. And while being one of the more upbeat numbers on the record, it's also in the wheelhouse for Zach Bryan's unique backward-facing pen, painting that nostalgic yet serious look at America through rose-colored glasses, while also at the same time highlighting the sacrifices that built that same America. The way that Brian constructs his slice of life tracks reminds me, as I mentioned earlier, of the way that Mellencamp wrote a lot of his lyrics, and again evoking the spirit of the boss, which is why he's on it. But or the record, not American Nights, sorry. But as for American Nights, though, it brings the band back for one of those change of pace tracks on an otherwise relatively stripped down record, actually, which is exactly what you've come to expect from Zach Bryan. Though I will say, go on a limb and say, I still think the first single is my favorite track on the record. So, but Pink Skies was also number 2 1 month ago.
I think with this track, like we talked about the Bruce Springsteen comparison. I know you talked about this track being a change of pace. This is what popped into my head as I listened to it. And I don't know if I'm out in left field here. So I'm curious to hear what you think, because on this track, I didn't hear as much Bruce Springsteen, but I heard a lot of Bob. Maybe not the Bob that y'all are thinking of. I'm not referring to Dylan. I'm specifically referring to Bob Seger, because this felt very much both in terms of sound and in terms of delivery like a Bob Seger track in the best possible way.
Yeah, you know what? I think I think I can get behind that comparison. My first thought was Mellencamp, but honestly, I think there is a different type of Midwestern rock that Seeger represents. If Mellencamp represents the pink houses of middle Indiana and southern Illinois and the corn of Iowa and Kansas, then Bob Seger does rock for Automation Alley.
Absolutely.
And I think that's probably the best comparison. It's the same feel done from two different points of view.
Yeah, everyone's rolling up their sleeves and pulling on their own bootstraps. It's just
Right.
It's just different.
It's a blue collar sound, just from a different, like you said, from a different point of view, from an urban and rural factory worker to farmer. Ain't This America from, like you said, from getting your hands in the dirt or, getting your hands on the line, one of the two.
Yeah, it's a subtle difference maybe as you're listening to the album, but it is definitely a difference. And it speaks to just even the nuanced variety that Zach Bryan's able to bring to the table.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Damn, we've gone a lot deeper than I ever expected. Like there was some definitely some philosophical links there than just, it's a good song. This is a good country track.
That's the beauty of music and the beauty of artists like Brian, who are able to really emote, who are really able to evoke that. Yeah,
exactly. All right. Yeah. Fun part. Down we go.
Yes. Our favorite, everyone's favorite.
We started the good honorable mentions with Eminem, and let's do the bad honorable mention with Eminem, because down at number 22, it's Brand New Dance. And this goes back to that thing where I mentioned, I don't know why it doesn't work for me. It just doesn't. I have seen others praise this song because it also has the same. It also has weird energy in a different light than Toby, but it just did not hit for me, and it was the worst rated song on the record.
Yeah, it was, to me, it was very much like, whose point of view is this song from? What is it? Is this supposed to be a bit? Is this supposed to actually be like a legitimate song? Are we supposed to see it as parody of himself, I guess? Like, there's just not a lot that really kind of guides you to what it should be, and it just kind of gets lost in translation.
Well, and the thing about it is, and I want to make sure I'm looking at the right thing before I want to make sure before I is that it was written for Encore. And when you put it in that level context, like, it makes all the sense now.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. It belongs. It feels like, it should probably be on the back end of that, between Just Lose It and Ass Like That.
I hate that era of Eminem even existed.
Yeah.
But it did. And, I will give M this, at least he is acknowledging his previous time. At least he's not running away from it, but I feel like it could have been portrayed differently, even if this was like this is your life, sort of deal for him. I feel like this could have gone a lot differently.
Right. And maybe that's the point of including a track like this on a record like this is, admitting, like, this is what I did in the past and this is not good, but this is where I was at. Like, okay, sure. Yeah. That's fine.
Just doesn't work.
Into the Bottom proper, and we move on. And I've been trying to figure out, again, what has rubbed me so wrong about my number 23 song. I mean, on its face, it's a good concept for a song. You're flipping the standard bro needs to get it wet tonight, so I'm getting drunk and leaving with whoever says yes, to she's going out and going home with the first guy she fancies, and of course they both have to be in cowboy boots as a thesis. But there's still just something about Ella Langley and Riley Green on You Look Like You Love Me. I just don't. Another point for for having another track with a classic country feeling. Okay, sure. So why don't I like this song? I really think it is just the vocals. Langley has this odd slide into every line of the chorus, which only accentuates her accent, which it sounds like she's also trying to force to be heavier than it may already be. I don't know. Like I am probably misreading this wrong. It's fine, and that's okay. But that it's heavy, and it just hits the ear wrong to me. Also, Green is singing, and is in singing the chorus, but you can barely tell. Like, it's not that he backed off as part of like doing a harmony. He didn't. He just dropped the octave into his range and is singing the same line. It's more like he just walked away from the microphone and just trying to disappear into the background.
I did that this episode. I know how that feels.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, overall, it might just be that this feels like a country version of a TikTok cash-in that like most country fans would be furious about a pop or rap song doing the same thing and getting chart attention.
Well, I think like that's an interesting analogy to put on it, because that's actually one of the things I was thinking about when listening to this track, because in the verses in both Ella's verse and then in Riley's verse, there is like a kind of spoken word component to it. And it was less like the kind of rap country, like think Sam Hunt, like it wasn't necessarily that. It was just like kind of spoken in it just, I don't know. I think I felt the opposite way of you, but just as inexplicably. Like I enjoyed this track. I really did. And which is rare, because usually the tracks at the bottom of your barrel every month belong there. And I'm not saying this one doesn't, but I did think that this was at the very, very least one of the better tracks on Ella Langley's debut album, Hungover, which also came out this month and I did listen to. It was all right. It was fine, generic, kind of cookie cutter country. It was okay. Kind of Ashley McBride, but just not quite as good. That sounds really mean. But Ashley McBride is just really fucking awesome. But yeah, I thought this was one of, if not maybe the best song on that album, because of how unique and fun and just unserious it was about what it was.
Right. And that's the thing. Like, I like the concept. And maybe if it comes up on some mixes, I'll change my tune. And we get to the end of the year, and I'll go, I like this song now, guys. I've heard it more. Like I said, I don't know what rubbed me the wrong way, and I freely admit that. So I am leaving the door open to be completely wrong about both this song and her, but not Riley Green. He's on the track, but he's trying to back out of the studio while singing.
Yeah, he's window dressing. That could have been anyone.
Yeah, no, it didn't matter. I don't even know. Not gonna be on this song anymore.
Such a good reference.
Damn.
Well, speaking of good, that's not what we're going to be talking about coming up with your next track.
Not at all.
The reverse of good.
Indeed it is. However, let me go backwards, because a few weeks ago we talked about the effect that AI is having and could be having on music going forward. And you know what, you really actually, I know I keep working cheap plugs into these things, but you really should go back an episode or two in your podcast feed and check that out if you haven't already, because it was a really good conversation, which is weird to say about anything that we're doing.
Yeah.
And I think we hit some stuff there that's worth, going back and talking. We might want to revisit this conversation in a couple months, because the technology is going to change so fast, but that's neither here nor there. But it sounds like somebody in a sound lab out in Sweden heard that show and said to themselves, oh, they want to rag on AI. That's not a Swedish accent at all. I'm going to stop.
That was perfect.
I don't even know where that, let's go back without the accent. So, you want to rag on AI generated stuff making the chart, do you? Well, here you go. Have Coldplay in. Feels like I'm falling in love. because computers don't need no spaces. And what does Feels Like I'm Falling in Love feel like? Absolutely nothing. There's nothing in this song that would indicate that humans were involved in its creation, and that includes Chris Martin's vocals. Sure, it's very clean, it's very glittery production for an otherwise pedestrian song. It's like the algorithm was asked, make the perfect single for adult contemporary radio. And so it did. But it doesn't make for interesting music. I mean, the lyrics are beyond generic. There are 2 lines of la 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 da da in the pre-chorus. Like even the computer was too bored by the task to write a full song. And then because they wanted to make it unique, they literally just removed all spelling or all punctuation and spacing in between for the title of Feels Like I'm Falling in Love. But I think the most damning critique of this one I actually saw in several places, and I completely agree, and it can be summed up with the statement that, I mean, it's all right, but completely soulless. And I understand that's saying something because this is a Coldplay song.
And not only is it a Coldplay song, but it's a Coldplay song produced by Max Martin, who we have talked about before on I don't think it's an episode that's hit the non-Spotify piece. We'll pull it all out of the vault. We'll pull it out of the vault eventually. Again, words are hard.
Will we now?
The walls in the mall are totally tall. Yeah, we will. It's surprising, and I guess I don't know what Max Martin in 2024 is really like, but this was just, at least like older Max Martin songs, if you think of like the late 90s, if you think of like Unsung, Backstreet Boys, several other acts, like there was a character to those songs, you know.
This, and I know we've made the jokes about it before, but this is after Max Martin has matured.
Oh, I hate that word in music.
And what does that word in music usually mean? That the output has begun to suck.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I think this, so.
Either, like you said, it starts to suck, or it just starts to coalesce into nothingness. Just vague, like lettuce. This is the lettuce of the Coldplay fucking category.
Absolutely a perfect description. Perfect. There's absolutely no caloric value to this song. It's mostly water, and that's all you're going to taste.
What's truly weird to me is I looked through their discography because I was trying to think of like, what's the last Coldplay song that I liked that they put out? And honestly, for me, that last song that I liked was A Sky Full of Stars. And I thought like, oh, that was just a few years ago, right? No, a decade ago. 2014 from Ghost Stories. They have had, 4 album releases since then. And then, of course, this single that will eventually be associated with, it has been announced. Moon Music is going to be the title of that album, coming out in October. But like, if this is indicative of the rest of the album, then I think we're going to go another full album without a song that I give a shit about it. And this was a discography that I loved, early on.
Yeah, no. Again, it was a band that you're like, okay, there's a certain thing you're going to do, but it sounds like you're going to do it really well. So it's going to be worth keeping a tabs on you. Unless the whole goal is to be an album to fall asleep to. Unless Coldplay is going to open a channel, ASMR Coldplay. I don't think we're going to have to worry about checking that one out for massive singles.
Hey, all I'm saying is that 5 Seconds of Summer scored the Calm collab, so why not Coldplay?
Sure, why not?
Basically there at this point. Yeah, unfortunate. It's one of those bands I just keep hoping like this is the album where they bring it back. This is the one where they go back to their roots and put out the kind of music that was on A Rush of Blood to the Head or that was on Viva La Vida. And no, it doesn't seem like it's going to happen.
Nope.
I'll be the first one to eat my words when they come out with when Moon Music drops and it's actually good. I'll be right there saying, yep, I was wrong. This is a banger of an album.
Yeah, if that's the case, it would be nice, but we shall see.
Indeed. What else shall we see towards the bottom of maybe at the bottom of your list? I kind of lost track of where we were at.
Yeah, absolutely. We're down at number 25. But take a walk with me, if you will. I remember it coming up at some point in the past. and I don't know where. And honestly, the more that I think about this, it may not even been on the show. It may just been in a conversation about music someplace. But I will admit that I share Todd in the Shadows aversion to Genesis. This is Tonight, Tonight, Tonight.
Yep.
I understand it's supposed to be about the harshness of drugs and addiction, but all that it comes out to me is just the harshness part of that and not enjoyable. So someone comes along and says, hey, that song sounds like doo-doo, and I can make it shittier. Enter the Black Eyed Peas, who by now have their own cottage industry of using 80s classics for samples and vomiting them back into our ears through our own special pass filters of Satan's membrane. We give you the worst hit single of July 2024, Tonight. I'm sorry, I had it right. Tonight, parentheses, Bad Boys Ride or Die, because wow, is that tie-in desperate. I don't know if you knew, but it's on the soundtrack for that movie.
Which movie was that?
It'd be Bad Boys Ride or Die.
Oh, no, that yeah, I didn't connect those dots.
End parentheses.
God damn it.
First and foremost, it's a dance track that's just barely fast enough to be danceable for the most part. It's a dance track with a sample played via buzzy quaaludes and helpfully sung through a Mr. Microphone with so much echo that Maya Lopez would blush. That is a deep nerd reference.
Incredible.
I know. Thank you. I know this is nothing new for the Peas, making terrible songs out of questionable samples. I get it. But for some reason, this feels more egregious. My guess is that they were hoping that the soundtrack single would come off as the same as the film itself, like kind of dumb, ultimately fun. Eventually, you'll just enjoy it. But man, the lifeless hook just fails to begin the fun and then robs the verses of any momentum they might have built. Like, you can't blame El Alfa and Becky G for their features here. 'Tis not their fault. This song sucks regardless, but mostly because they were betrayed by the fact that the track that the Peas handed them.
I had listened to this. I hadn't heard it until we talked about this episode, whenever we talked about it most recently here a week or two ago or whatever. And I was just in listening to it and not knowing anything else besides Bad Boy soundtrack, because again, it's in the title of the fucking song. This isn't a Bad Boy soundtrack song, bro. This is not.
No, my only guess is that they were looking for, like, okay, so Bad Boys is in Miami. Well, so was Miami Vice. And Miami Vice featured an episode with Phil Collins, and Phil Collins sang this song. So there's your direct connection. And I'm like, no, we went like 4 blocks out of our way to get here. We could have just kept going. There are so many other, like, if you really needed an 80s song, there are other 80s songs that you could have hit that were more direct. Sample sample Jan Hammer. Sample the 80s, the Miami Vice soundtrack or theme straight up. Directly there, you don't have to go all the way around, and you can probably do more with that sample than you could with the Genesis one.
Oh my God, so much more. So much more.
Yeah.
I'm sure, I'm not looking at the soundtrack and not knowing anything else that's on it, I'm sure this is the worst song on it. It pretty much has to be, right? I hope. God, I hope.
I'm honestly not sure, but you know what? Let's do Google Radio and find out.
Fingers crossed I'm not eating my words there and there's not a song worse than this on that soundtrack.
God, that would suck. I mean, I believe the movie's done pretty well.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure it's the same, just silly fun as the first 2, because I think this is the third one.
Fourth
one? Oh, shit.
Yeah. There's a song that's Will Smith and Sean Paul.
Okay, just for the spectacle, I'm in for that one.
Yeah.
For the pure what the fuckingness of it.
I mean, there's also a track from Flo Milli, so there's a possibility there. But there's also, It's also a 24-minute album.
Huh.
10 tracks, 24 minutes.
Where's the rest of it? Did it get deleted off the hard drive? What happened?
Right. Like, where did the
where music?
Nope. Tonight is, in fact, the longest song on the record at 3.5 minutes.
Wow. Well, I'll give them that. They're in and out quick. I respect that.
I guess so.
As little as I have to listen to this song is going to be the better, because like this, even as a Black Eyed Peas track, like this has to be one of the worst, just even in their discography. Like they've put out some really fun, really solid music. This is truly neither.
I think that's true. I think you can absolutely say that it may have not been the greatest thing. However, they've put out fun tracks that, do the job that of what they're supposed. That this ain't it though.
No, not at all. They could have done so much. Like you said, Becky G and El Afa, just like they're there and they're doing their damnedest to pick this track up, but there's only so much they could do. But, my friend, there is only so much you can do when telling us what you thought, as we go back to the top of your list, was the number one track for the top 40 charting singles of July 2024.
Yes, it's like instantly having energy shoved back into the conversation. And we'll go through here because I think everything about the song that tops this month's list can be summed up by the reaction that I got from you. Fourth wall break, as you sort of mentioned, we shared lists before recording, and we did that for like the first time ever, mostly to keep the show at a reasonable length, I think, and we're failing at it. But Zack then sent back to me that this was stuck in his head for the better part of the last month, so he could speak to it. And what Earworm asked you has proven itself to be the best pop song of the month? Well, it's Chappelle Roan and Hot to Go. And let me start with your comment.
That's my brain talking. That's not me.
There you go. That's it. It's incredibly catchy, especially that hook that just begs you to sing along. That's literally why they jam the chorus pedal to the floor on the vocals, literally. But the rest of the song keeps up that fun and infectious energy all the way through, powered by those buzzy synths, which is kind of going to be, it seems like we referenced Dua Lipa and how she's kind of carved out nouveau disco as kind of her sound. And Chappelle Roan sounds like she's going to carve out synth pop. And that's where it's going to be her sound. And I'm here for it all. Man, I don't know how many more words to throw at this one that aren't already encompassed by fun and infectious. Well, also horny, which, sure, also fun. Though hopefully not infectious.
Okay.
But what's more crazy to me than that is that this song has been cooking for nearly a year, officially getting released back last August, and just now getting the chart breakthrough that it deserves.
Always weird how that happens, how there's a delay sometimes.
It is weird, yeah. And it was even after it had kind of blown up on social media and TikTok. And then there's still a bit of a delay before it finally started rising up the charts, which makes no sense.
But no, I think you absolutely nailed it. Like Chappelle Roan having this kind of sex positive anthem that is fun. I feel like a lot of times, like, there's so much sex in music. It is absurd how much sex there is in music, and nothing wrong with it. It's fucking wonderful. But it's like, it always seems to be either like super kind of creeper, or a lot of times like very serious, very like almost somber tone. Like this is a fun thing, for a lot of people in a lot of ways. And Chappell kind of took that as her, her motif, I guess, her theme for this track. Like, this is just upbeat. It's fun. It's silly. The music video is exceptional. She plays mini golf. She teaches her grandparents a dance. It's a whole thing. Go check that out on YouTube. It's every bit as fun as the song. But yeah, certainly, I don't know if we are doing Song of the Summer anymore, but this would be a very strong contender for it if we are.
We should talk after the show.
Oh boy, I think we're making money moves over here.
We're doing something.
Certainly the ascent of Chappell Roan, you've heard more, just like Zach Bryan, you've certainly heard more about that over the last few months than perhaps ever before. And for good reason on both counts. Like, they're both insanely talented and bringing their own special form of entertainment to the forefront. And I adore them both. And
hopefully, and for the benefit of all of us, they'll be able to continue this long after whatever these releases end up being.
Absolutely. Yeah. More of the same from both of you, please.
Yes, please.
Amazing.
So now the real question is, we have to turn outward and ask you, the audience, the listener, are we wrong? Are we right? How badly are we wrong? Are we right? Please don't punch us in the face when you see us. But more importantly, what you should do is get through and, sorry, my phone just exploded and I got distracted. Shiny objects. Do your thing, dude.
Yes, I will take this one and hopefully be able to remember all of the places where you can find the Fairly Kick-Ass podcast on social media. I've got it down to a science now, guys. I've got the plugs down. 3 of the 4 things start with the letter T. I just have to remember which 3 they are. And I think I did it this time. It's TikTok, it's Threads, it's Twitter, and then the outlier is Instagram at Fairly Kick-Ass. Across the 4 will get you where you need to go. fairlykickass@gmail.com. I always say eventually we're going to make that at fairlykickass.com. Still hasn't happened. Probably will never happen. So just go ahead and bookmark fairlykickass@gmail.com. Can you bookmark email addresses? I don't fucking know. I don't know how these things work.
I mean, you can just put them in your address book, right?
Yeah, do that. Do that thing that he said, but for us, for the address that I just mentioned, do that. I almost said Facebook. We don't do Facebook anymore. Don't go to our Facebook. There's nothing there. Do go to fairlykickass.com, where you will find all of our behind the scenes posts, all of our ride along playlists for all of these episodes. Those are hosted on Spotify. I don't know if you can search for them on Spotify. If you just search for Fairly Kick-Ass, you'll get our podcast, which is also there. And in fact, you'll also get all of the previous, I mentioned the vaulted episodes that we recorded prior to moving to a more open format where we can share this to multiple different platforms. Literally wherever you find your podcasts, you can find this one. Wasn't always the case. There's still a lot of good stuff behind that Spotify wall. And then nothing, because I think I covered it all. So that's that. That's how you get in touch with us. Like Dan said, tell us all the things that we did correctly. Tell us all the things we inevitably did incorrectly, because that is a much longer list. And we appreciate all of you listening. Any parting words for the people, Dan, before we land this plane?
Abdicate.
You're the man. Abdicate. Good night.